Hi folks, GamerBug here again, and in today's video I'm going to be once again crossing the universes of Grand Theft Auto and the Transformers to find some new alt modes, this time for the Decepticons. Now, if you watched my previous video, you'll know I was using GTA to come up with these new alt modes because it's fun and Grand Theft Auto is also great at creating vehicles that bypass those pesky licensing laws. As Transformers also loves to dodge the same licensing issue, they're a match made in heaven. Speaking of my previous video, well, if you haven't watched it, then maybe check it out as it covers all the 1984 Autobot toys as reimagined in GTA 5 and online, and it goes over the rules and other stuff. If you did watch it and you're here, then you probably want to see the 1984 Decepticons that got left out due to time constraints, and find them you shall. Just a quick recap on the rules. 1. The update must be a vehicle available in GTA 5 or GTA Online, so no guns, tape decks, cassette tapes, so on. 2. It must be something that could conceivably be made into a toy, even if it never will. Otherwise, what's the point? You can just pick anything. And 3. Try to make them different from the original G1 alt modes wherever possible. Just a point, I also have a tendency to break my own rules, but I will adhere to the first one at all costs. Okay, with the intro out of the way, I guess we have to go into the obligatory request of if you like the video, please leave a like, and if you aren't yet, please consider subscribing. I'm about to hit 400 subscribers, and obviously we're then going to make our way up to 500, which would be a heck of a milestone. And to all of those watching who are subscribed already, thank you. Right, first up we have Megatron. Normally I'd be doing these in alphabetical order, but there are a lot less Decepticons to cover, so let's start with a controversial alt mode, the infamous 1984 gun. As a kid, I had a friend that owned what was the toy of the Decepticon leader, and I really did love the gun mode, accessories and all, unlike the god-awful robot mode. But we're here for the alts and our focus shall remain there. The gun itself was an officially licensed Walther P38. This can be verified by the writing on the box, but with all its accessories it was based specifically on a variant featured in the Man from U.N.C.L.E. TV show from the 1960s. Now in the 1980s, having toy guns wasn't anything special. Matter of fact, you can find them in every toy shop and a lot of local news agents and so on, and most toy guns were cheap and gave a lot of play value. However, things that were, to quote a song, acceptable in the 80s are big no-nos today, and toy guns seems to be one of them. That's not to say you can't get them at all, but they are rare, most likely found in cheap discount stores rather than mainstream toy shops. Not that there are many of those mainstream toy shops around anymore either. Coming back from my digression, but suffice to say, Hasbro has zero interest in reproducing toy guns as alt modes for Transformers anymore, so the iconic Walther is a thing of the past for poor old Megatron. Of course, that fits nicely in with the theme of this video, as we must use vehicle modes, so what do we choose for the Decepticon leader? Well, I wanted to keep with the Decepticons sticking with the military theme, as I feel with there being less of them, they should get some kind of advantage, and they never cared too much about the disguise part, and they're bad guys, so alt modes that cause damage makes sense. So trawling through the options in GTA, and the obvious choice was the Rhino tank. It makes sense, as a tank is powerful and it's Megatron's go-to alt mode these days, but it's different enough from the other tanks from the past. The issue I have is, well, I'm just bored of Megatron being a tank, and from what I can see, a tank in 2024 isn't that big a deal, which feels kinda naff for the big bad of the bad guys, so I will put the tank as backup. But my actual choice is this, the Savage Gunship, based on the real-life Mi-24 Hind. So why a helicopter? Well, for a start, Megatron being a tank makes him a lot less versatile than a lot of his subordinates, whereas this gives him a lot more maneuverability and adaptability. Then we have the fact that most gunships are armed to the teeth and can decimate targets with a variety of weaponry in a short amount of time with a fair degree of accuracy. This includes decimating tanks. Add to all that, it's a pretty sizable aircraft and that it looks tough and menacing, and I feel this is an ideal option for Megatron. Another plus is this is bigger than the Rhino tank, making it more menacing in size and comparable to the options I'm choosing for the Seekers later in the video. If you did see my last video, you know I'm trying my best to keep the alt modes in scale as much as possible, and this definitely goes towards that. Finally, I could see those rocket pods actually combining to make his fusion cannon. I wouldn't even be sad if it was a rocket cannon in robot mode. All around, I could actually see this as a viable toy for the Decepticon leader. Let's move on to Megatron's second in command, Starscream. When it comes to the original 1984 toys, the Seeker jets were just brilliant, though personally I only ever got my hands on a Starscream toy to play with. I won't include the Skywarp a friend had, as that was so battered and had both fists, weapons and a wing missing, it wasn't really playable with, except for maybe as a casualty of war. Based on the F-15 Eagle jet fighter, I just love this toy. The jet modes look very real, well, to my 10-year-old eyes, and I loved military toys as a kid, so this was just a great option, and then it turned into a robot as well. That's a big thumbs up. I also loved it had a cockpit for a pilot, and I'd often throw a Zoid pilot in there, as was often the case when Transformers had cockpit kind of options. Shifting over to the present day, and Grand Theft Auto isn't exactly bristling with fighter jets, but it does have a few, and so I mulled over two obvious options and plumped for the Joe-built P996 Laser. Looking like a combination of mainly F-16 with a dash of possibly F-18 on the tail fins, it's different enough to the classic Starscream alt mode and still looks awesome, fast and deadly. Well, it does if you ignore my photoshopping skills. I feel it would scale well with Megatron, who would actually be a bit bigger in alt mode, and can still keep the flavour and feel of the G1 original. Skywarp. Unsurprisingly, everything I said about Starscream applies here. Cool toy, cool alt mode. I do have a soft spot for him as my favourite Seeker, for no reason other than A, he could teleport, which is friggin' cool, and B, he was black and purple, which is cooler than teleporting. So with that out of the way, we can move straight over to the Grand Theft Auto option. Now I felt that, just like the Autobots in my previous video, I did not want to continue with the palette swap syndrome, so I had to pick something different for Skywarp, and so I have, opting for the Mammoth F-160 Raiju. Based on a combination of mainly the Lockheed Martin F-35 with some of the Northrop YF-23 thrown in for the wings and tail fins, it's basically GTA stealth fighter, and if Skywarp and his teleporting screams anything to me, it's stealth. Obviously this had to be black, so back to Photoshop it was, and I'd say this was acceptable if not really good enough to truly represent Skywarp, but it certainly gives the gist across. I like it's different without being completely alien to the G1 original, and I feel this would make a damn fine Skywarp toy. It may not shock you that we're going to be talking about Thundercracker next, but talk about him we shall. I won't spend too long on discussing his G1 toy as it's a palette swap, but I will say I've never handled a real copy of this toy, with my only real life interaction being staring at it in the toy shop in its box. Oddly, it was my least favourite of the Seeker trio, but I have no idea why. My guess would be I just wasn't bothered about the blue colour scheme, because it was identical in every other way, and unlike Starscream, he had a special power in his sonic boom. Meh, kids, they make no sense. Delving through the options once again in Grand Theft Auto, and I was tempted by the Hydra, but that just felt kinda samey, and I wanted the name Thundercracker to mean something, not just that he could do a sonic boom. So I went with the only correct option, and that is the B-11 Strike Force. If you're going to say an attack aircraft is going to be called Thundercracker, then it had better bloody well be based on the A-10 Thunderbolt. I mean, come on, it's almost already called the same thing. With all GTA vehicles, it has other things thrown into that A-10 Thunderbolt mix, which is apparently here mainly the tail fin and wings for a Northrop YA-9. But I'll take people's word for that, but comparing pictures, it seems legit. Now, I know this is deviating from the good old G1 look a fair bit, but he's still a jet. He's still in the same kind of size class, and it's not like the transformation needs to be all that different. But damn if this couldn't make an awesome toy. Okay, yes, I'll address the other obvious elephant in the room, but GamerBug, Powerglide is based on the A-10 Thunderbolt, I can hear you all saying, and yes, he is. However, in my last video, I also stated the Autobots will no longer be using military vehicles for their alt modes, and that includes Powerglide. So if I make a video updating the 1985 alt modes, I will have to find alternatives for him and Warpath. But there's every chance that video won't get made, so it's a possible problem for future me, though I feel Warpath would have a decent option available. All that aside, this is my new mode for Thundercracker, and it kicks arse, even with my bad Photoshop skills. Oh, and I also considered this for Megatron, but I really didn't want him as any kind of plane. Back on track, and we have our next character, and that is Shockwave. Yes, I did say Shockwave, and okay, let's digress once more. No, Shockwave was not an original 1984 lineup Decepticon. Yes, he came out in 1985, but I have 3 reasons for choosing him in this video. 1. There are way less Decepticons in the 1984 toy lineup than the Autobots, so it's a balancing thing. 2, he's a very iconic character who I wanted to look at an alt mode for. And 3, I'm not sure the level of interest in these videos, so I don't really know how many more I'll do. I'll cover a bit more at the end of the video about this. Back to the matter at hand, and once again I never had any interaction with this toy as a kid. It was elusive in the UK, not getting a mainline release here, though I think a few catalogues did claim to stock it based on the pictures in the toy section. I mentioned in a previous video there was a version I saw in a local newsagents, which I had explained to me in the comments, and I quote, "Shockwave toy mould was licensed to a couple of different companies before Hasbro and Takara licensed the mould. Most notable was a grey version released by Radio Shack in the US and Tandy in the UK in 1985 called Galactic Man, fan nicknamed Shockwave." End quote, and at Michael Shield 7025, thank you for that great info. Having zero interaction with this means I couldn't say if the toy was good or bad. I can only go by pictures, and to me, I guess it was fine enough looking, but being a laser gun, it didn't do it for me, as I wanted my robots to be in disguise, damn it, and this ain't a disguise. That aside, I did love the Shockwave character when he appeared in the Marvel comic, iconic entrance and followed by an iconic cover art. So with no desire to replicate a laser gun, plus I can't anyway as it's against my rules, I wanted something a bit futuristic or alien but still grounded in reality, and I came up with 2 options. The Western Company Annihilator stealth helicopter and the TM-02 Kanjali tank. Neither of these are based on real, at least not real and in service, vehicles, with the Kanjali based on the scrapped PL-01 prototype tank, and the Annihilator is influenced by the highly mysterious stealth version of the UH-80 Blackhawk, which may or may not exist. Either way, we're not really going for a robot in a very good disguise here, although arguably a stealth chopper is more in disguise than a future tank, but for Shockwave I'm willing to take some liberties. Starting with the Kanjali tank, I just feel this leaps out at me and shouts Shockwave very loudly, and he's never been a tank I don't think, and by that I mean a track tank. I know he's been a spider tank a few times, but those designs always sucked, and this doesn't, so this is option 1, live with it. Now I think I slightly prefer the Annihilator stealth chopper option, but that might be I prefer how the recolor came out in Photoshop. It also feels more real than the tank, as apparently it is, but shh. And it looks like the UH-80 Ghosthawk from Arma 3. A workhorse that has taken me into and out of many a combat zone in that game, and also caused me many a respawn en route due to anti-air a lot as well. Ah, the memories. Back on track, back on track. The more I look at it, the more this feels like it'd be an ideal fit for Shockwave. It has the right lines and design, suits the purple colour. What a cool toy this would make. I'll leave the final decision to you, but it's a hard choice. So now we move on to Soundwave, my favourite Decepticon ever, and of course this means I need to do him a lot of justice. But first, the original G1 alt mode and my feelings towards it. Well, what can I say? This was one of my favourite toys as a kid. It's iconic, it's cool, it has a lot of play value in the more dress-up roleplay kind of sense, and it can have all those wonderful tapes as minions and accessories. And if I'm honest, it's kind of dumb. Yeah, I know I'm saying blasphemy to my own ears, but the Walkman may have cut it as a kid, but as an adult, it really only works in fiction. The whole mass shifting malarkey just drags me way out of reality. Yeah, the reality of 15-foot tall sentient robots, I know, but still. So luckily we are scrapping the personal stereo as much as it burns my inner child, and we need something better. Now Soundwave has had other modes for sure, some of which were okay and some were floating space bricks, but the only ones I kinda liked were the vehicles that sort of resembled armoured cars or SUV kind of things, but even then they were fine, not great. And also, what about the minions? Where do they fit? When it came to GT options, I had 2 thoughts. One came as I was researching for this video, and the other I've had for some time. I'm going to start with the more recent idea, which is okay, but I think it's not my favourite, and that is the Western Company Cargo Bob. Now yes, it's not the epitome of Photoshops, but let's face it, none of mine are, but I feel this really could work for Soundwave. First up, it's big, and Soundwave was never a small robot, so that works for me. Second, he can fly, which massively helps when most of the other Decepticons can. And no, none of that cartoon they can all fly crap, alt modes are important for a reason. Thirdly, as stated, he's big, he can fit others inside him, and that could be his minions in some form or another. And finally, if Megatron was a tank, or Shockwave, he could airlift them, making that tank mode less redundant. All around, I like this idea, and I feel it's solid, but it's not my favourite, and that's because I prefer this, the MTL Brickade. NAF editing skills aside, I can so see that front cab being the chest on a modern G1 take for Soundwave. Hell, I don't know why it's never been done before. They always seem to use the roof or bonnet, but this just makes way more sense to recreate that cassette door look, so why not use it? Also, I can imagine this being some kind of surveillance truck. You could even have the back do a bit of an Optimus and make it removable and turn it into some kind of base mode for his minions to sit. I mean, it's not important if you can hide the kibble, but I feel that'd be a lot of kibble. Everything about this seems simple and makes sense, and for a spy communication officer such as Soundwave, he's one of the few where blending in matters. Looks like Soundwave? Check. Low key? Check. Versatile? Check. Space for minions? Check. Yep, I'd want this as a toy, and I'm sad it never will be. Right, let's start with Ravage. We've discussed the tape mode, so we can jump straight to the new Grand Theft Auto alt mode, and I wanted something that really suits his style, and could fit inside one of those Soundwave alt modes I just described. So, I went with the Nagasaki Carbon RS. Why this? Well, yeah, it could have been a bunch of the available bikes, but this one looks slick and is already black, which helped. But I also wanted a sports bike kind of look, and of all of them, this just had the right vibe. Ravage is sleek, this is sleek. Ravage is cool, this is cool. Ravage has a stealth vibe, and so does this. Well, except once you open up the engine, I'm sure it's really noisy, but let's call that a growl and tick another box. Also, the motorcycle is not for stealth as much as speed and transportation and blending in. The robot is the stealthy one. All in all, this is a damn good alternative and would be a cool toy, and honestly, I'm surprised it's not been an option yet. Or maybe it has. Let me know in the comments. Next up is Buzzsaw and Laserbeak, and this is the first time I feel I want to go with the Twinsies alt mode. They both already fly, so the alt mode really doesn't need to do that, and having a car or bike seems redundant as well, they can fly. It was one of the times I felt something inanimate might be better, but the rules were it had to be a vehicle. So I went for this, the Sea Shark Jet Ski. Granted, it's about as useful to a flying robot as a car or bike, but it's different, and the Decepticons don't have much in the way of watercraft, so yeah, why not? Now, I could have maybe done a bit of a better job on the colour schemes, but it gives a decent idea. I feel both are small enough to work as alt modes that can be carried by Soundwave, and honestly, I couldn't come up with anything better. I'm not 100% happy with these, but I feel they will be fun toys. So we end with Frenzy and Rumble, and I'm not going for the Twins route here, as I felt I found some cool alt modes from GTA that were similar enough, yet different from each other and the other tapes. So with a fair trigger warning for who is what colour, but I am talking about the toys here, we have the Nagasaki Strider for Frenzy and the Dinka Verus for Rumble. Unlike the choices for the Bird duo, I do really like these as mini vehicle options for them, with the idea of a more rugged off-road vehicle for the rough and tumble Rumble. I can even see his pile drivers on the rack at the back, and for Frenzy I wanted a more frenetic, speedy, balls to the wall kind of vehicle, and the Strider says all that to me. I like that one is more off-road and one is more street-styled, giving each a unique role to fulfill, giving each a separate personality in their alt modes, and I can see them both fitting inside Soundwave's truck mode from earlier. I did consider a few other options, such as both being ATVs, just different designs, or perhaps an ATV and a dirt bike, and even considered the RC tank, but this is much more in disguise to me, even if the bike is a bit of an eye-turner, but they would make some awesome toys. So that's it for the 1984 Decepticon toys, and overall I like these as good alternatives to what they have in the current toy lines. But what do you think? Did you have better ideas, and what are they, and why? Let me know in the comments. Just before I sign off, I wanted to cover whether I'm going to carry on this idea for the 85 and 86 toy lines, as is my typical way of doing things, and I'm really not sure. First of all, these take a lot longer than one might think to make, and the last video didn't gain a great deal of traction, so it can be a lot of work for not much return. But to be honest, I make them for my fun and my curiosity, so that's sort of a minor reason. More so is the issue of the 1985 Decepticon specifically, and it's the reason I added Shockwave to this video. You see, in 1985, we had 7 insects, which realistically turning into anything else is just sort of making them pointless. The Dinobots would be a similar issue. We had 3 more palette swap jets, and there really isn't that many more planes I feel would honestly look good replacing them. Also, I find the coneheads to be a bit meh. Then we also had 2 triple changes, and there are no spacecraft in GTA, which is surprising as they pretty much went off the rails a lot in GTA Online, and we have 1 train and 2 tanks. I also don't really love the triple changer thing anyway, they just don't work when it comes to being practical toys. So if I did it, I'd have to bypass 1985 with the Decepticons, though excluding the Dinobots, I feel the 85 Autobots would be much easier. I don't know, it's a maybe. Anyway, if you got this far, thank you. And if you did like the video, then please, as always, consider leaving a like and subscribing, which makes a big difference to the channel and is always massively appreciated. Otherwise, all there is to say is, as always, thank you for watching, and until next time, GamerBugUK out.